Hello, creatives. I have a very big question for you this morning. Or maybe it's this evening, depends on when you're watching. Here's the question. Do you choose your inspiration, or does your inspiration choose you? I'm asking this because this week I've been chosen by lily pads to bring them out in watercolor and a few other media. And I think they chose me because I'm a great believer in Elizabeth Gilbert's ideas in Big Magic. Have you read it yet? Big Magic is a book about creative ideas, and I think the central tenet is that creative ideas are out there floating around in the air, looking for a host to bring them to life. And if you are chosen by that creative idea, you need to play with it and pay attention to it, or else it will fly off and find another host. So I'm doing my due diligence. I'm playing with my lily pads, and actually I had quite a bit of fun because somehow when I put together these purples and the greens, it brings me such joy to see these two colors together. So today I'm working in this really tiny little watercolor book that I made out of some 140 pound Arches cold press. And I'm working with watercolor, as I said. And at the end of this video, I will show you all of the colors, color names, and the different colors of watercolor pencils and Neocolor 2s that I'm bringing out. But wait, I can hear you asking me this. Wait, you're like, Kendra, wait. Where did those lily pads find you? Because you're in Portland. Are there lily pads in Portland? I don't know. Maybe there are, but I haven't seen them. No. Let me back up. We went to the Central Oregon coast, that wonderful, wonderful landscape that is composed almost entirely of sand dunes that may be 5-6 stories high sand dunes. They are enormous. Sand dunes and little lakes. And so one day we went out with our friends and rented kayaks, put them in my friend's pickup, took them over to this little tiny lake called Lake Woahink, and we paddled around, looking around at the shoreline, and to my delight, lily pads as far as the eye could see. So this is how we found the lily pads, or rather, how the lily pads found me. So there you are. You have the backstory on the lily pads. Today I'm painting lily pads. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things that you may or may not know about. One is thirsty brush, and the other one is glazing. These are two techniques that are, I think, pretty common in watercolor practice, and I use them in this painting quite a bit. And also, you have surely noticed the beautiful illustration to the left of my painting. This is a book that's laid open, and it is a book by Melissa Sweet. She's an illustrator and an author, and this book is about E.B. White. He was the author of Charlotte's Web, and so she wrote about him. But she has a number of other children's books and other things that she's illustrated, and in a future video I'll have to bring all of those out and share them with you, because she has a very lovely illustration style. And what I'm looking at in her stuff is how to stylize an image in order to create that illustrated look. Yeah. So I'm keeping her in mind as I'm doing this lily pad painting. Okay, so right there, what I was doing is just blending two colors of watercolor pencil one of the pencils is by Caran d'Ache and the other one is by Faber-Castell. And I guess as you go along, you find that this happens. Now here I've put a little too much pigment down. It was way too bright for the painting, but it didn't freak out. All I did was to spread it out, and then in a second you'll see this thirsty brush technique where I lift the pigment with a clean brush. So I dip it in the water, then I dip it on my paper towel, and I'm just pulling that pigment back up out. It gives a very different feeling than dabbing it with a paper towel. So if you haven't tried this before, I highly recommend trying the thirsty brush technique and see how it works for you. You put down a little too much pigment, which happens. And this is the start of glazing right here, where I'm taking some yellow, and now I'm on to something else, and laying the yellow over some of the greens just to shine them up and to show the sunlight on them. Yeah, so again, bringing in the watercolor pencil as my pigment, which I kind of just did it back and forth. Sometimes I used my little yogurt lid palette, and sometimes I used the watercolor pencils. I'm bringing in cerulean blue as my water, and the thought that I had was that the color would get very dark to the lower right hand corner of my painting and very light on the upper left hand corner. So I just put down some pigment, and then I just kept going back with the clean water to spread it out very, very lightly in that upper left hand corner. And right here I decided to bring in a little bit of a purple color into the water, just for variety, just to see how it would look. And here again on the little, there's this tiny little flower lily, and I put a little too much pigment and I picked it up a little bit. So here in that lower right corner, I'm going to bring in that strong dark color, and I did it with the Stabilo pencil, Stabilo All, which will be linked in the description. Just everything that I can think of, I'll link in the description so that you can find it if you're interested in getting it. So that really brings a really strong, rich black color. In fact, if you don't use blacks very often, you don't need to buy a tube of black. You don't have to mix it either. You could just buy a pencil and then you'll be ready. All right. As I went along with this painting, now you see me dipping into that palette up above. And that's actually a QOR paint. I have a few tubes of this QOR, and this one's a green gold. And it made quite a lovely sun-kissed sort of glaze to the top of some of those lily pads. And I picked just 4 or 5 of them to have that QOR core paint with the green gold. All right, we're circling into the end of this painting, as you can tell, and when I'm thinking about it, sometimes I just sit and look, and sometimes I play with that little white stone that I have in order to help me to think. It's my thinking stone. All right, so now we're towards the end of this video where I'm going to show you the colors that I used. So on this yogurt lid, I have my greens. So really they're just yellows and blues that I randomly mixed together in order to get a variety of greens. So you'll see this at the very end written out, but I can just tell you now, it's Hansa yellow, Quin gold, New Gamboge, cerulean, and Prussian blue. Those are the colors on that lid right now, but I change it every now and then. I may add a different color of yellow or a different color of blue and start mixing some different greens. I love this for all the landscape kind of paintings that I do because you know when you look in nature, nothing is a constant green. And so even though I have a few tubes of things like Hooker's Green, I find that I never use those manufactured greens right out of the tube because I like the huge variety that one can get by mixing the yellows and the blues. So there's the range of greens that I've been able to make from that palette. I call it a palette, but it's a yogurt lid. It's a very fancy word for it's a very fancy palette. And here's my purples palette. Same concept. I really like to have a variety of purples. And so this palette will have the same kind of thing. It has, you may recognize that there's a Prussian blue there, and Quin rose, ultramarine pink, and quinacridone magenta. Quinacridone and Quin are the same thing, just sometimes I like to shorten it by calling it Quin. So this gives me a great variety, especially when I mix in that Prussian blue that is so deep and staining. It gives me a very deep dark purple. And then the lighter ones, I think that I would say ultramarine pink is maybe the lightest. There we go. What a beautiful range of purples, pinks. And then there's a couple of Faber-Castell. These are my Faber-Castell watercolor pencils. This one's cadmium yellow lemon, and it's kind of like a green gold. Very great color. I keep reaching for it. And then this is Faber-Castell mauve. Really deep dark purple, kind of like dioxazine purple. And then here are the Caran d'Ache Swiss color pencils, and they don't have color names. It's actually quite interesting. And the set of them is like a set of 12 that I have that I didn't actually buy. My friend died, and when she died, her husband, her partner, brought all of her watercolor supplies to our group, and we all, chose the things that we wanted from her supplies. So I think of her whenever I'm using her Caran d'Ache watercolor pencils so fondly. So then this is the Neocolor Mauve, Neocolor 2, and then there's Aubergine. Aubergine. This is the way the British call eggplants. I think maybe it's nicer, aubergine. So mauve and aubergine were the ones that I used the most. And then there was a little bit of apricot, which is that color here. Apricot Neocolor 2. And a teeny tiny bit of scarlet. And that little piece of scarlet was also in my friend's collection. So I think of her with that as well. And then the only blue I used is the cerulean. Well, the only true blue that I used. Obviously, I used the Prussian blue for other things. And I'm going to pick out that Stabilo All pencil and just watch how it reacts with water. Oof. It's very rich. And then finally, the last thing I'm putting on this palette is the Lime Green Neocolor 2. I never actually put on the QOR green gold, but if you're curious, that color number is PY129. So if you find PY129 in any brand, it should be the same as the QOR green gold, or pretty close anyway, because it's the same base pigment. All right, my dear friends, this is it for this video. I wish you well. I'm hoping you're having a beautiful summer and seeing all the things and staying cool. And I will be back a couple weeks, I think, or I may take a little bit more time off for the summer to end. Bye.